be going through a few things, definitely touching on the top three things to actually introduce this Abyssinian Muhammad. We'll be going through the literary sources, then we'll be going through the epigraphical sources, and then the familial sources. If we do have time, I would definitely like to give you guys what I call the kingly example. Most of you guys may have heard from the Islamic traditions. There was a particular Ethiopian king called the Negus. And to me, this is another legendary figure because we can't quite place who this Negus was in history. And for me, I've actually, I've done the research, and I think I can firmly state who this Negus or this Ethiopian king was based on, and you will find him throughout this presentation. But we will definitely go in. Hopefully, on a second presentation, we can go in a bit more further and see who this Ethiopian king was. And then, of course, we do the historical versus the traditional demonstration, seeing how the historical morphed into the traditional or the traditional Islamic narrative understanding, or the standard Islamic narrative, or the dominant Islamic narrative, how those two figures kind of had a split and the traditions were created and became normative. So on my channel, I always like to start off, these types of presentations with a little story of my own. So here it goes. Let me tell you a story of a man in the 6th century who was destined to be a prophet of the Arabian Peninsula. He was a preacher who preached his message throughout Mecca to those who would listen, but gloom and doom was upon him, for he was cast out by his tribe. But fortunately, he was able to convince his followers to emigrate to Abyssinia, where he fostered a wonderful relationship with his Ethiopian king. As he grew in power and status, he was appointed a military leader. He would regularly do dawah to persuade the Arabs to make pilgrimage to the Kaaba. But the people turned against him, which finally led him to make an expedition against them in Mecca. His hope from start to finish was to convert the people to his new religion. And if I was to ask you guys, who was this individual? Of course, resoundingly, you'll all say, of course, Muhammad. And if I was to ask you again, and what was this new religion he brought? I'm sure all of you lot would say, resoundingly again, Islam. But I would say to you, no. In fact, this religion was Christianity. Well, it was a new form of Christianity that was brought into the Arabian Peninsula. I think academics today are just now starting to call this a paleo form of, or proto-Islam, but it was very much so Christianity. And now I'm about to introduce you guys to this Muhammad. And this Muhammad, with inside of the Islamic records, if you go to Ibn Ishaq, the Sirah Rasulullah, this has got to be, I think it has to be a foundational text for anybody who's interested in Islam, for anybody who's interested in the history or historicity of Islam. I think that's a foundational text. And in that text, before you actually hear the story or the narrative of the Muhammad of Islam, which you find on page 104, before you even get to that stage, you have to read up to page 22 and 23, where this particular Muhammad that we have on screen right now, the historical Muhammad, was introduced. And I'll just read it to you guys. It's on the screen in the green highlighted. It says here, with Abraha, there were some Arabs who had come to see his bounty. Among them, Muhammad ibn Khuzai ibn Khuzaba al-Dakhwani al-Sulami, with a number of his tribesmen, including a brother of his called Kays. While they were with him, a feast of Abraha occurred, and he sent them to the feast. I'm just going to skip a little bit just to get the bits that actually matter. Then page 23 here, it says here, Abraha replied that he would send them what they liked because his sole purpose in inviting them was to show that he honored them. Then he crowned Muhammad and made him Amir of Mudar and ordered him to go among the people to invite them to pilgrimage at his cathedral, which he had built. Now, I found this passage very, very interesting when I first started learning about Islam, and I started learning about yeah, the history of Islam. And I was like, hold on. So you're telling me before the Muhammad of Islam that we all know about, there was already a Muhammad in the Arabian Peninsula that was preaching a religion, well, there is Christianity, and was there and was conquering Mecca as well. And this conquering party, the Abyssinians that were conquering Mecca, or had an expedition in Mecca, they also had an elephant called Mahmud. To me, it just sounded very strange that Muhammad of Islam was born in the year of the elephant, i.e., the year of Mahmud the elephant, and was named after the conquering party who came in to conquer Mecca, which was, the leader, which was Muhammad as well. I was like, I don't get it. For me, it stumped me for a while. I thought maybe this could be a foreshadowing. Maybe I didn't really understand it. So I said to myself, let me just dig a bit deeper, because I fully well understood from reading history that there is mentions of individuals who were historical figures. There's a mention of Abraha, who we know was a king of Arabia, a king of Abyssinia. We know that there was another individual called Qais that's also been mentioned, who is Muhammad's brother, who is also, he was a phylak, he was a governor of Palestine. He, ruled the Kinda tribe of Arabs and the Ma'ad tribes of Arabs as well. So I knew all this information. I said, okay, let me just dig a bit deeper to kind of find out more about this particular Muhammad rather than the Muhammad of the traditions. And that has brought me onto a crazy journey and has me presenting this information to you guys today. But in reading this, I said to myself, let's break down this particular passage. And over here, we start to break down this particular passage. It's called the Pericope Analysis in Search of the Historical Muhammad. So over here, as we read, the key passage here says, then he crowned Muhammad and made him Amir of Mudar, and ordered him to go among the people to invite them to pilgrimage at his cathedral, which he had built. This is Abraha, the king of Abyssinia, doing these things. So for me, I realized that in reading history, I like to read history diachronically. So, when I was learning these topics, these subjects, I was like, okay, cool. Let me start from the 3rd century, 4th century, 5th century, 6th century, and kind of read up about what was taking place at every single point in the history of Christianity pertaining to that region over there in Arabia. And I was like, hold on, a cathedral, to my knowledge, due to, most of you guys may know about this, but there was something called the Chalcedonian, the Chalcedonian Creed, whatever it passed, the tome, they called it the Tome of Leo, basically. So most of the Christians there, they decided not to follow that tome. And they said, we are anti-Chalcedonians. We don't want to follow that. And Himyarite kingdom, the Ethiopian kingdom, they were part of that. So there was literally no bishops that were given that during that certain time period. And if you have it, you must have a bishop. Why? Because unlike every other church within inside of Christianity, a cathedral is very special because a cathedral holds a cathedra. A cathedra is a throne or a chair where a bishop resides. Okay, so it says here that he crowned Muhammad. I looked through the Muslim records, and they said the crowning could either be he was a king, or he was a military leader. But again, those two answers didn't make no sense to me because it all pertained to religion. It all pertained to him going out and doing propagation, doing dawah, and inviting people to a cathedral. So I done some further studies, and I realized that this office that Abraha appointed Muhammad, there was 2 offices. One was an office of bishop, and the second office, let's just do this one, the bishop. So basically, within inside of the life and works of St. Gregorius, we know that Abraha had a see or a city that was called the city or the Kursi al-Habasha, the see of the Abyssinians or the see of Abyssinia. So he made Muhammad the bishop or the crowned him as
Watermelon TV, like and subscribe. Get this knowledge. Kalam Titans TV. Let's go.
the governor of Mudar, or in the historical records, it's also known as Ma'ad as well. And I said, okay, cool. Cool. All right, this is Islamic records. Can all of this be actually verified? So we find here in Timothy Power, the Red Sea and Byzantium to the. We see that John Ephesius was writing in 588, and he also records that the seat of Zafar, which was one of the capitals of Abraha during that time period, remained vacant for 22 years upon the death of the bishop, owing to the imposition of the Chalcedonian doctrine on Alexandria, which is to say that the Yemeni Christians were staunchly monophysites. Given the political significance of bishops in the 6th and 7th centuries, the viceroy of Egypt and the governor of Alia at the time of the Muslim conquest were both bishops. One suspects that the church structure described by the sources in fact represents the apparatus of colonial administration set up by Caleb el-Esba. Okay, so we see here that it was quite common for the Abyssinians to set up bishops as actual political leaders. So we see over here, hold on one second. So we see over here where Abraha crowned him as a bishop and also made him a governor. So made him a political leader and a religious leader. And this was something that was common during that time frame. But what's very interesting is it also records that the seat of Zafar, the bishop or the bishophood or the bishopric, I can't remember how to pronounce it properly, but that was left open due to the Chalcedonian doctrine entering into Alexandria, which the Ethiopians were, how can I put it, subordinate to the Alexandrian patriarch itself. But they refused to actually accept a bishop for 22 years, or some say 25 years. And it was very interesting that all of a sudden, there is a cathedral being built, which houses a cathedral, which is a throne for a bishop. And then this particular Muhammad is being crowned as a bishop. I was like, ooh, this is very interesting. Let's see what else we can find. So we see here that also Abraha commissioned him as being an itinerant preacher, telling him to go amongst the people, and also as a pilgrimage propagandist to get people to actually make pilgrimage to his cathedral as well. So let me just give you the historical context. I kind of spoke about it already, but let's just go in a bit deeper. And this is from the Chronicle of Pseudo-Dionysius of Tel Mar. And it says here, he, the king of the Ethiopians, had sent to Alexandria for a bishop and received one from there before the doctrine of the Chalcedonian Synod, and had penetrated those parts. This bishop, after being in this country, briefly paid his debt to nature. Sad times. And the king of the Homerites, or the Himyarites, having learnt that the doctrine of the Chalcedonian Synod had been introduced into Alexandria, and that Theodosius had been expelled on account of his faith and deposed because he recalled from embracing the synod, himself offended by this, refused to accept a bishop from Alexandria. So we can see here that the Himyarites, which is the capital, or where, so you have the Ethiopians, or the Axumites, which is on mainland Africa, Ethiopia. Then you have the Himyarites, or the Abyssinians, which is on mainland South Arabia, in the Arabian Peninsula. And they were known as the Himyarites. They refused to accept any bishops that were coming from the Chalcedonian standpoint. And what's very interesting here is, as it says here, like, what happened, what changed, because we know that there was no bishops in that area, and we see what actually happened. We see that Al-Harith ibn Jabal, he was the king of the Hassanids, and you'll later on we'll kind of discuss something which is very interesting, because he took over from this Abyssinian Muhammad's grandfather. He actually took over from him, and he was the one who took back Monophysite or Monophysite Christianity into the region. And I will just quote it. I will just read out what it says here. This state of matters excited the religious zeal of Al-Harith ibn Jabala, the king of Ghassan, who came to Constantinople in 542 or 543 and urged Theodora to send 2 or 3 bishops to Syria. Accordingly, 2 were consecrated by Theodosius, the exiled patriarch of Alexandria, namely Theodore as bishop of Busra, with jurisdiction over the provinces of Palestine and Arabia, and Jacob as bishop of Edessa, with jurisdiction over all Syria and Asia. From this time forward, Jacob's life was one of ceaseless toil and hardship. He visited in person and on foot almost every part of his vast diocese, consecrating deacons and priests, strengthening the weak, and bringing back those who had erred from the true faith. But to restore the monophysite church, bishops were necessary, and the consecration of a bishop required the presence of at least 3 others. And then it further talks about, Sergius, his crowning moment. Jacob's crowning moment was when Sergius was, made patriarch of Antioch. Sergius died in 547, and the see remained vacant for 3 years, after which, by the advice of Theodosius, Jacob and his bishops chose Paul, an abbot of Alexandria, to be their patriarch. So we can see that the historical context lets us know that Al-Harith was the change maker to bring back monophysite Christianity into the region of Syria and Arabia. He got in contact with the deposed Theodosius, who was the patriarch of Alexandria, and he got them to consecrate, they say 2 or 3 bishops. The 3rd bishop is never mentioned, and we just wonder who could that 3rd bishop possibly be. But we do know of the bishop Theodore and the bishop Jacob of Bardaeus, but they call him here Jacob as bishop of Edessa. We see that they went on to try to consecrate and get other bishops and to rebuild the church as well. So over here, we see something written. I believe this was from John of Ephesus, and we find this, the translation of Witold in the pseudo-dionysus of Tel Mar again. And it says here, when they became wearied by many efforts and failed to receive a bishop who did not adhere to the council, they went so far as to transgress canonical rules and decided that priests should gather and put the gospel upon the head of one of them, and behold, so he was made bishop. In this way, they thought they followed the rules of anointing a bishop, since they did not wait for the acceptance of the lay attendants. Either most of the later became indignant, did not consider this imposition of hands as valid, and did not accept it. On the contrary, a great schism arose among them. So this is talking about the Abyssinians yet again. I should have read from the beginning, basically, kind of tells you here. Thus, they returned empty-handed, but every year the envoys from these 3 kingdoms came and went for approximately 25 years until priests disappeared and were no longer found among those people. So we can see that something took place within inside of the Himyarite kingdom amongst the Abyssinians, where a bishop was elected, whether it was elected canonically or not. This says that it was not canonically, it didn't take place canonically, but we can see that there was a lack of a bishop for 25 years or 22 years, and then all of a sudden a bishop was made. So over here, just to finish this off, it says here that Abraham, dating from 19, notably names the 2nd person of the Trinity. He's Messiah. That is the Messiah of Rahman. This 2nd person is church, bait, and priest, Cassis. These changes probably indicate a new Christology and a change in ecclesiastical organization. At the time of Caleb, the Himyarite church was closely controlled by the church of Axum, and it skips over. It is therefore likely that under Abraham, the church of Himyar separated itself from the church of Axum, which answered to the see of Alexandria. The church of Himyar may have turned towards Antioch and Syria. Before the massacre of 523, the Christians of Najran already had close relations with the ecclesiastical authorities of northern Syria, which were generally hostile to the Council of Chalcedon and had Severus of Antioch as their emblematic figure. So we can see here that even on the epigraphic information, so on the steles and monuments, we can see that Abraha, broke away from the Axumite church that was subordinate to Alexandria. They therefore the Axumite church under the Alexandrian rule would have been Chalcedonians, but the South Arabians, the Yemenis, the Abyssinians, they were non-Chalcedonian, and we can see quite clearly they lent more over to the Syrian church, and we can see that that Syrian church, was still following the lineage of the exiled patriarch Theodosius, and they preserved that. Because of, let me just quickly go back, because of the works of Harith and the queen plus Theodosius, they were able to get these new bishops in and consecrate these bishops, and it is quite clearly that the Abyssinians did exactly the same thing. They would have been in close contact with the Syrians and was able to actually get their own bishop consecrated and be the head of the Abyssinian church as well. And for me, all the evidence points quite clearly that this individual, as recorded with inside of the Syro literature, they call that individual Muhammad. And these records say clearly that there was a change, there was a bishop that was put in place. It's never named, but it is quite clearly that something took place during the rule of Abraham, where the religion of that area changed and something drastic took place during that time frame. So that's the first part. And then let's quickly touch on some of these inscriptions. So let's go into the epigraphical information. Muhammad found in Abyssinia. So over here on the CIH 541 dam inscription, we have something that is very, very interesting, in my opinion. This dam inscription basically is a monument that memorializes and commemorates three key things. It commemorates number one, the where is it? It commemorates the expedition that Abraha did in Arabia and subduing certain Arabs that had revolted. And then it commemorates the consecration of this new church. And then, of course, the rebuilding.
Yeah, yeah. So Kalam is really digging in deep, breaking the knowledge, pretty much saying that there was two Muhammads, and one was from Abyssinia, which was an Afrocentric Muhammad, and then the other one was a cosplaying, pretty much. And so, we got to dig, man, because there's a people despise Negroes on the planet, and we're feeling it. We're seeing it every day, and they're making the new kids with all this streaming going on and all these, nigga this and monkey this and all that. They're trying to instill it into the new generation. So that's why I'm here, man, to help stream, be the bridge, and you know, keep the light shining. Watermelon TV, 48 Meadow. I'm out.